Hello, friends and dear viewers. I welcome you all to the current episode. Friends, I remember I concluded my earlier episode with deforestation. We have a lot more discussed about deforestation, which is one of the causes of soil erosion. So, friends, in continuation to my earlier topic, let's move on to deforestation, right? The organic content of the forest soils is high, and when a forest is cleared, the trees are burned and thus leading to the loss of organic matter above in the soil. And the soil organisms are deprived of carbon source, leading to massive emissions of carbon dioxide, of course, contributing to global warming. And the various forms of deforestation can be studied as follows for our convenience sake, right? The first one to deal with is felling of trees. Felling of trees for firewood and building materials. Friends, wood is the primary source of fuel in most of the developing countries. Wood is used to make thousands of consumer products like building material, furniture, and paper, etc. On the other hand, conversion of forests to agricultural lands to meet the demands of the growing population. Right. Of course, this is another shade of that type of cultivation. Earlier, I have discussed that is shifting cultivation. Of course, it is called by various names at various places like Jum cultivation or Podu cultivation, etc. The shifting cultivation is called with the various names at different places, of course, across the country, across India. Cultivation of cash crops and development of cattle, sheep ranching is a form for a good source of income to the government as well as the uh, people, people of the nation. Commercial logging of teak, mahogany, and ebony destroys the trees and clears up the forests for agriculture. Friends, it is a very well known fact that at various parts across the country, people they are making new places to practice agriculture by clearing the forest cover. Of course, the best examples I have cited like the teak, the mahogany, ebony, etc. These are the huge trees, dear friends. It takes hundreds of years to grow up to a greater extent. On commercial scale, nowadays people they are growing in urban areas also. It is easy to clear them. It is easy to clear the places with such a big trees and taking up the agriculture. Of course, that cannot be compensated. That cannot be compensated. That cannot be justified also. So people can practice agriculture at various places where there are barren lands. I mean, of course, that should be dealt with the afforestation programs, etc. Friends. Now, industrial and mining activities they pollute the forest ecosystem. It is a well-known fact, dear friends. Of course, we have a number of case studies to deal with the industrial as well as the mining activities, which are causing pollution in that particular forest areas. I mean, the forest ecosystems are being very much suffered by the effluents or the pollutants released due to the activities like industrialization as well as the mining activity. Right, friends. Now let's discuss about the contribution of the natural factors. How the natural factors that contribute to soil degradation, right? Number one factor, dear friends. Of course, it's the heavy rainfall on weak soils. Heavy rainfall on weak soils. I think you can imagine, dear friends, weak soils in a sense Generally, the surfaces which are exposed to high temperatures and where you don't find any green coverage, of course, due to various reasons, which we have earlier discussed in our episode also. So, the weak soil is very much susceptible for, a degradation activity due to heavy rainfall. Right? Let's see how it takes place and how it operates. Right, friends. Raindrops cause detachment of fine soil particles which are transported along with runoff water. Okay, I'll come again once again. Raindrops cause detachment of fine soil particles which are transported along with runoff water. You can imagine such a huge loss, dear friends. The soil particles, which are fine particles that are moved away, they just move with that runoff water. Maybe deposited somewhere else. Of course, that land may be put into that agriculture practices or not. But we have lost soil coverage in a particular area where we find weak soils, and of course, due to the heavy and torrential rainfalls. Right. Next comes the role of drought. Okay. When the water dries up, the soil particles loosen up, which may be carried away by wind or rain. When the water dries up, the soil particles loosen up, which may be carried away by wind or rain. Right. Next, steep slopes. Water flows along with soil particles along steep slopes due to gravitational force. So, gravitational force has a great influence in the flow of water. Water flows along with soil particles along steep slopes, that is due to the or under the influence of gravitational force. And severe storms, floods, and tornadoes have disastrous effects on the structure of the soil. Yeah, friends, we're all aware, being civilized or educated, we can imagine the impacts or the effects of severe storms, floods, tornadoes, etc. How disastrous they are and what kind of serious impacts they lead on the structure of the soil, and that too causing this soil erosion. Okay, friends. Now let's take up the human-induced factors. Of course, friends. So far, we have dealt in with the causes of erosion by water, by wind, and through deforestation and through natural factors. And now it's time to deal with the factors that are causing the soil erosion, and particularly with the involvement and with the manipulation of the human beings. So, human induced factors. These include the intensive farming to increase the agricultural products. The intensive farming to increase the agricultural products. Friends, I think I should clarify two things for you. Right now, I have used a word that is intensive farming. Friends, generally the farming techniques or farming practices can be broadly or widely classified into two main groups, that is intensive farming as well as the extensive farming. So countries which are traditional, we can say India is the best example where we practice intensive farming, dear friends. Intensive farming in sense practicing agriculture on small pockets or raising crops on land which is available in little amounts. Of course, friends, you can imagine a country like India with a huge human potential have very less arable land. have very less arable land. Again, I think you know what's arable land means, friends. The land which is helpful or useful to practice agriculture is called as arable land, right? Of course, to some, in some statistics, country like India, where there is a great, difference, great, very great difference in this availability of arable land to the existing human population. So, large population or large number of human beings who are dependent on very small amount of land to practice agriculture. That is called as intensive farming. Of course, this intensive farming is also basically due to this, cultural and traditional practices of our country, and thereby, of course, growing crops like paddy, etc., which are also traditional. We can imagine, friends, in intensive farming is a part and parcel of Indian community, because earlier in India we used to see that families with more number of children, with more number of children having very less economic potential or financial potential to that family, and a number of people. Say, for example, you can take them in certain decades, you can find a family with not less than 10 members, so that is including the parents also. Then they used to depend upon generally an average landholding capacity of countries like India could be less than a half acre, I think, dear friends. As far as the earlier demographic or statistics are taken into consideration. So that is, in other words, I can say that people are more in number, but in terms of land available to practice agriculture is very much less in comparison. That is the proper definition to define about intensive agriculture, right? And of course, due to a lack of irrigation facilities, etc., they may also be one of the factors to go for this intensive farming, right? So intensive farming to increase agricultural products, that is one of the human induced factor, dear friends, right? The fertile soil gets damaged by excessive use of fertilizers and irrigation methods. So, friends, I think you got my point. Earlier, I have given an example like paddy. Of course, we used to cultivate sugarcane also in our country, where you find huge waterlogged conditions to raise these crops, and in that name, we contribute much to the water pollution. We contribute much to the water pollution by adding huge quantities of fertilizers, etc., to raise the or to enhance the fertility of the soil, dear friends. Also, in the name of enriching the soil fertility, or in the name of getting good yield, we are practicing intensive farming. So ultimately, they contribute to the loss of soil, right? And development of houses, dear friends. Unmanaged construction activity by construction of houses leads to loosening of soil particles, which can be easily carried away by rainwater or wind. Okay, it's basically unmanaged construction activity. Of course, it's a government policy, dear friends. We all know, especially in countries like India, we have poor, what to say. Um, we didn't have proper rules and regulations, of course, to monitor all these activities. So there is every chance to have these unmanaged construction activities by construction of houses, right? Of course, that leads to losing the soil particles, ultimately leading to the soil erosion, right, friends? Construction of roads also, it contributes to soil degradation. Let us see how it happens. The loose soil along roadsides can be easily carried away by rainwater or winds. So there is every chance to remove that loose soil along roadsides due to rainwater or wind. And now, friends, it's gravity. Now, let us see how gravity it plays a role in soil erosion. Due to gravitational force of the earth, the land and water are pushed downhill. In fact, the steeper the slope, the more the soil is pushed downhill and the faster the water flows. We can imagine, friends, we can imagine valleys or hilly areas, etc., where you can see the influence of the gravitational force of Earth, how it influences the velocity of that running water, etc. Right? Of course, the depositional feature of soil also. Right. Next comes the part of compaction. Right, friends, compaction, and it is due to compaction of the soil by cattle, sheep, or heavy machinery. The porosity of soil is lost. The porosity of soil is lost. You can imagine, friends, porosity is the main thing that plays a good role in which helps in permeability or percolation process of water in order to enhance the levels of groundwater table, right? So compaction, it is due to compaction of soil by cattle, sheep or heavy machinery, the porosity of the soil is lost. Along with that, the soil is unable to absorb or drain water, resulting in a water logging condition. So, due to lack of the drainage facilities, and of course, the water is being logged in a particular area for a considerable period of time, and there is every chance for the soil erosion in the name of compaction, right, friends? Next comes desertification. It is the degradation of soil structure in arid, semi-arid, and dry subhumid areas as a result of climatic variations and anthropogenic activities. So these number of factors they play in the formation of deserts. So it is nothing but the desertification. Next, friends, of course, in the salinization of soils. Salinization of soils means increasing levels of, salt, increasing amounts of salts in soils of particular areas, right? Let us see what happens in salinization of soils and how it influences the soil erosion activity. The salts are built up in the salts are built up in soils to such an extent that it may be toxic to the plants. A most uh, interesting thing, dear friends, the salts are built up in soils to such an extent that it may be toxic to the plants, and this is referred to as salinization of soils. So friends, we can imagine in particular areas where the soils they have accumulation of huge amounts of soils, and if that soil it happens to conserve or contain huge amounts of salts, and that particular locality or area is not suitable for the sustainability of the flora due to the toxic effects that may cause by the increased salt content in that particular soils, right? And the presence of salts in soil uh, decreases the osmotic potential of the soil so that plants are unable to take up water from it. Friends, I think it's very clear for you. Salinization of soil, it apparently affects or influences the osmotic potential of the soil. I think I need not go in detail or explaining or giving the definition for osmotic potential, dear friends. I just move away. Soil salinization leads to degradation of soils and vegetation. Of course, the ions responsible for salinization are sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and chlorine. Okay, and now it's time to move on to organic and nutrient depletion. Okay, friends, the soil tends to lose the organic matter and changes its composition when plowing, burning of trees, excessive fertilizer, and irrigation may damage the soil often permanently. Okay, next, chemical contamination. Next is the chemical contamination. Friends, the chemicals from industrial, mining, and agricultural activities cause degradation of the soil. These three main and crucial activities that lead to cause of degradation of soil, right? Industrial, mining, and agriculture. Next, slip or landslides. Slip or landslides. A prolonged wet period followed by a minor earthquake leads to a small section of soil that slides downhill. Of course, during this process, the loose soil formed has a tendency to be washed away by wind or water. Right? And it's time for us to deal with the acidification of soil. Acidification of soil. Right? I think you can. I can get the meaning. Acidification means, right. And of course, friends, it is caused by discharge of sulfur dioxide from power plants and other heavy industries such as steel plants and motor vehicles. Okay, we can understand that acidification of soils is basically due to the discharge of sulfur dioxide from power plants and other heavy industries such as steel plants and motor vehicles. So you can understand to what extent these kind of activities they are contributing to soil degradation or erosion of soil, friends. Now let us take up the desertification. Desertification, right? Desertification means nothing but friends. You can imagine a place which is full of greenery, having flora. I mean, good coverage of greenery in a particular area, and over a period of time or a considerable period of time, and due to various factors that are leading to soil degradation and soil erosion, and a course of time that area with full of greenery is completely lost, and that leads to formation of a desert, and that is literally means the desertification. Now let us see how the process of formation of deserts takes place in detail, right? Desertification. So friends, it is the process of formation of deserts. I mean, conversion of fertile lands to arid lands. Conversion of fertile lands to arid lands. That is nothing but the desertification. And this is due to climatic factors or due to human interference. This is because due to climatic factors or due to human interference. Desertification is the degradation of soil structure in arid, semi-arid, and dry, sub-humid areas as a result of climatic variations and anthropogenic activities. And for example, or to take up as a case study, dear friends, the famous Sahara Desert is formed due to extensive overgrazing by herbivores. I think you got my point. Sahara Desert, a most famous desert in the world itself. If you observe how is it formed, okay, it's due to the extensive overgrazing by herbivores which are habited to that particular environment. Now, the predators, I mean lions. The predators are generally lions in this ecosystem, and they were captured by Romans. They were captured by Romans. Of course, this is a cultural aspect, dear friends. And now the predators were captured by Romans. Hence, the population of herbivores increased drastically. I think, friends, you hope you are following following my earlier episodes also, wherein we have discussed a lot in various episodes regarding these ecosystems, the food chain, the food web, etc., where and how the living organisms of different levels depend upon one another in the consuming process or in the process of eating and being eaten by one another, right? So the predators, nothing but the lions, which are captured by the Romans, and that is the reason, and that led to the increase in the population of the herbivores. So that has resulted into the excessive grazing by the herbivores. So there is every chance to lose the flora um, in a greater extent, right? Now, the factors which contribute to desertification include: number one, deforestation and overgrazing of the lands by herbivorous animals, increase of atmospheric dust particles, of course, climatic factors, and finally, improper usage of land resources that also leads to desertification. So, friends, these are the five things which contribute to the desertification processes, right? And now we are going to deal with the conservation of land resources. The conservation of land resources. So, friends, let us see here. Number one, by making the barren lands covered with trees, we can conserve land resources by making the barren lands covered with trees. And the second one, by creating awareness in the public, by conducting classes on proper usage of land. The third one, by conserving the soil, which is a land resource, and of course we have the different ways to conserve soil. Let us look into the various or different ways to conserve the soil, dear friends. So we have several methods of conservation. Several methods of soil conservation have been developed with a view to maintain the soil as a permanent and a useful resource, and they are aimed at controlling soil erosion and reclaim waste lands that are unfit for cultivation. They are aimed at controlling soil erosion and reclaim waste lands that are unfit for cultivation. And several factors contribute to the erosion of soils: continuous rains, running water, strong winds, storms, of course, chemical degradation, the physical degradation, and lastly, the natural disasters. Lastly, the natural disasters. So these are all the things, dear friends. These are all the several things we have to deal with while studying about the methods of soil conservation. So, friends, I think it's time for us to conclude this episode, and let us start our next episode with the control of soil erosion. Hope you enjoyed this session, dear friends. Let us meet in our next episode. Thank you, one and all.